Good morning, everyone. This is Yip from Unit, and we welcome you to our seventh cohort, actually, of the 6 weeks flagship program for blockchain literacy. It's called Unit Masters. And every week we bring to you two experts and practitioners from the field of Web3 and blockchain economy, and they will share from their experience. So you learn about a certain topic, and we have 6 topics for the 6 weeks from somebody who has been in the field for a little bit, so you can kind of get a contextualized perspective. Because as all of us know, like the markets are going crazy right now, almost a $3 trillion market, and it's growing fast every day. And when you kind of new into the field, it's very difficult to understand, like, what is signal and what is noise. And this is what we're doing at Unit Masters, to provide you a very clear structure over 6 weeks so you can gain what we call blockchain literacy. You can understand how to read the news and where to look for deeper resources, and what are actually the underlying concepts and principles that have been that this new economy has been built on. And today we have, in our first session in week 1, where we speak about Internet of Value and decentralization in the Web3 context, we have Weynand with us. And it's been really an honor to get Weynand here. Weynand has been in the field forever. And I just want to read out the bio. He's a rocket scientist that actually loves slingshotting new technologies into customer-centric orbits. That's a bold claim. And he's been working with teams at the start of the internet already, and actually spent a celebration of the year 2000 sitting in a data center. Super cool. And he actually spent a lot of his time bringing, like, simplifying actually, I don't think simplifying is the right word, but he brings structure into complexity and turns it into products that actually help reduce inequitability in the world. We had very good discussions about how can we use peer-to-peer decentralized technologies to, for example, help other nations that have been left behind in the past 20, 30 years of economic progress to actually gain a voice again in the economy of the future. And I hope, Weynand, you can share a little bit about the vision and mission behind Threefold, your own story, and the key concepts of decentralization and Internet of Value. And then everyone else, if you feel like, oh, you need to understand some words better that are being used, like, by anyone here in this Unit Masters, then please write into the chat, and then me or our speaker, we can clarify, so everyone has the same level of understanding by the end of the session. Weynand, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Yip, for doing that. And I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be able to present this to you. I'll make a little apologies up front. There are elements which are fairly technical. I choose to put them in because it is about learning blockchain and blockchain usage. If and when there are indeed terms and terminology that is not clear, let's go back to it at the end of it and try to clarify. But I think it's important. It's a big story. I tried to put it into a 30-minute presentation, more or less. And like I said, I'll share the slides afterwards. And whoever wants to even have more than just the slides, there's a lot more content that I can share to hopefully inspire you to look at this new world. And just also to say, I'll start sharing my screen now. Just also to make sure that that is said. We're much more, as Yip said in the introduction, a traditional IT play than necessarily a blockchain play and a crypto play. We come from, and we'll touch on that, from a background as about 65 people globally in this project. But we have invented part of the internet as it sits today. I mean, like Yip said, I mean, I spent my New Year's Eve on the millennium change in a data center because everybody thought that it would explode and everything would fall apart. The year 2K, Y2K problem. Nothing happened. It was a big and the most dull evening, I think, in my life to date. But again, that is our background. We do use blockchain technology a lot, and we rely on it to do what we need to do. But it is very much trying to make the world have decentralized internet, because it is not very decentralized today. And I'll try to take you through that journey that we are on and that we are very excited about. So first and foremost, where are we right now with that whole internet? Because everybody speaks about it, but what is it? And again, I ran around data centers with screwdrivers, so I sort of understand, but that's not everybody's understanding. So today, we've got market leaders. Again, there's big names out there: Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, all of those players play a role in what we see as the internet. And what they do is, in very specific places, so centralized, create factories in which they deliver, or from what they deliver, what they do. And again, in most cases, that is a web service or a web page or a social platform. But it's all happening in data centers that only exist in a few places in the world. And those few places are places where there is enough capital, where there is enough people with knowledge, and when there is enough power to actually power these things. And the other thing, which is not necessarily that clear, but there's a huge effort today to extend what lives in those data centers to everybody on a global scale by extending the networks. Just by extending the networks, they try to reach the almost 8 billion people that are on this planet. And they stay very centralized in terms of where they deliver, where they put the effort, where they put their knowledge and their IP, and everything stays only in a very few places. And what the result of that is that you can see that money and data and freedom almost is being extracted from countries these days by these large players. And again, I speak maybe with a little bit of a negative tone around them, but that's not what I mean. That is how this model has been built. That is what it is today. And we believe as a project that needs to start to change, because there's more than just that. I mean, it's done fantastic in terms of innovation, but we need to solve a problem. And again, we look at it that the internet is one of mankind's greatest achievements. Again, like the initial invention of the book. But if the book and that technology of book printing would only live with a few companies and a few organizations that write all of those books, then we wouldn't be in the world that we are today. So we definitely need to make a step forward and actually start to create a more decentralized platform and a more decentralized way of bringing those digital services to people on a global scale. And that model that stands there today results in, as I said earlier, I mean, there's money being extracted from countries because they can't build up their own local digital economy. I mean, it's all flowing towards those large monopolies. There's loss of data. There's many movies these days on Netflix and documentaries out there that show and highlight the fact that most of these large companies are data harvesters and are using that data to learn. Again, nothing bad with that business model, but it does leave out people that use and consume those services because they don't get, except a free service, anything back for it. It also leads to loss of sovereignty, because you're no longer in charge of your own destiny with regards to where your digital data lives and what your digital data is supported for and used for. And unfortunately, we've seen the first few cases here where even countries and country governments are no longer in charge of their government or in charge of their country, because at a certain point in time, Google decided that search was no longer available for a certain part of the world, which is a really weird situation. And I think it's a situation where we don't want to be. So how are we moving towards actually solving that? And again, we talk about blockchain and Web 3.0, which is a really great step forward, where now data is stored and shared outside of those large monopolies, outside of those large countries. But we believe if we want to take it one step further, that we actually say copying data 1,000 times over, which is what a blockchain does, is not necessarily the solution to the problem. The problem is that we need to become in charge of our own destiny and in charge of our own data and manage our own data. That is, for us, the ultimate challenge to get to. Quick introduction in terms of why do we think and why do we believe we can do this? Like Jip already said, I mean, most of us have been in the industry for a long time, but the one thing I want to highlight is, again, this comes from a presentation that is being used for different purposes, but we've already had engineers think about how to make things more efficient for a very long time. And back in the early days when data centers were just there and around, thousands of computers inside such a data center had all the same operating system, either Windows or one shape or form of Unix. And backups, a simple service like backup, was copying and storing the same file of all of those operating systems 1,000 times and more over, which in the end is a ridiculous exercise because you only need one copy for certain files and operating systems. So already back then, the founder of Threefold started to work on technology to actually back such files up only once and not thousands of times, just making sure that it is very efficient. And we've innovated throughout the last 2 decades in various forms and shapes to make efficiency prevail, let's say, creating business out of it. So having said all of that, the problem definition is there. We see it, we recognize it, we work with it every day, and we can't do without it anymore. So how do we now actually take steps towards building that other model of creating that ubiquitous, and we look at it almost like electricity. We need data processing, we need data storage. A large part of the economy, a large part of learning, a large part of what we do every day depends on it. Look at how we speak together. I mean, it depends on actually having a video conferencing facility somewhere, all of us connected through that facility and communicating, like Yip said, from various places in the world and enjoying common thinking and idea sharing. So we need that and we want to continue to have that. But again, the question is, do we want to rely on these centralized companies to do that for us and where they are always a third party in the middle? Again, Zoom being the one that we use right now. And we said no. So the first step towards not doing that is to actually start creating, and we refer to it as a fabric or a utility that needs to exist everywhere, which again is being built by computers because we do need computers to compute and to store data. And the steps that we take towards doing that is to start looking at it from a different perspective. And again, apologies up front for the ones that are not necessarily technically inclined, but it only is 2 or 3 slides where I try to explain the concept of what we've built and what is out there and available right now. And what we look at that whole stack, where at the top, most people only see the experience, a social platform, a form of a video conferencing facility, which is the experience side of it. We dove down all the way to the lowest layer, which in the end is the hardware and the operating system. And we said this needs to be done in a different way than what it is right now. Again, right now, we rely on large parties, Google, AWS being the most known ones, and Azure, Microsoft, that create digital utility on which many applications that we use on a daily basis run in a few facilities around the world. And we said we want to do it in a different way. We want to bring that back to a setup where it is by people, for people, truly peer-to-peer, truly done by people, servicing other people. Because there's really no reason why we all can't have a small or a larger computer, doesn't really matter, sitting somewhere where there is electricity and connectivity available, a living room, a school building, a barn. I mean, anything where those 2 elements exist, you can start building some digital utility. This is what the bottom layer is, and we'll go a little bit through what that does. Then we do need, and that's the second layer, we've really looked and innovated harder where blockchain comes around the corner. We really don't want those people, it's by people, for people, to be learning anything that they need to do to maintain and keep this capacity, this digital capacity, up and running. Because that would limit where we can go. That would limit it again to places where people have either the knowledge or are able to acquire and learn the knowledge to do so. So it needs to be something that in the end runs as autonomous as possible. No need for administrators, no need for people that have the expertise. Those are under the hood, the 2 layers that we see as step 1 to get to a more decentralized setup. And a little bit more detail, what are the players in there and how does this all tie together and where does digital currencies and blockchain come into play? There's 3 main players, there's more, but there's 3 main players to be identified. If you think about it by people, for people, then we need people that actually own and position or operate a piece of hardware. And again, like I said, it can be in a living room, it can be in a barn, it can be in a school, it can be in a telephone mast, it can be anywhere, as long as it's got connectivity and electricity. And we call those people farmers. Other projects call them miners, but we call them farmers. And really, with the effort on farmers and trying to be green, because we don't farm or we don't mine and use CPU cycles to actually run an algorithm and choose a winner. We actually see farmers as creating this digital utility for which there is a return. So if and when you've proven after a month that your computer, small, medium, large, super large, doesn't really matter, has been available for real IT applications to run on it, for real storage workloads, you will get a digital return. Tokens will be minted, which you will get. Then that's a utility token. So those tokens only exist by farmers farming capacity. That's how it all started. People started to present computers. You have to dedicate your computer. You can't run anything else on it. It's a real dedicated OS running as low level as we can get, which actually creates utility tokens. Then there's two other players that are important in this digital economy. There's consumers, that's all of us in the end, that consume digital services. Well, in order to consume digital services that are being created by these farmers, you need to get your hands on this digital currency, because that is in the end the only means for paying for that capacity back to the farmers who make it available. So through some form of a distributed or centralized exchange, you will have to get your hands on some of this currency. Or there is a developer which actually builds a digital service on top of it. And let's not go into detail, but the support is there for all mainstream, let's say, automation frameworks and application deployment and automation frameworks. But those developers can also build a model in which they want to be paid in normal US dollars or euros. That we don't preclude, but then they have to actually reserve the capacity by using digital currency. So there needs to be a way that they can get their hands on it as well. And that is the super simple tokenomics, as that is called, where producers of capacity create digital currency and consumers of capacity need that digital currency in the end to consume local created and local produced capacity. No longer those long lines, no longer those dependency on, let's say, long cables. Then a little bit more in, well, less detail, but a little bit more in depth. You can't do everything from people's homes because we just don't have all of the technicalities that you need to run large-scale services from, let's say, capacity on people's or in people's living room. So you need to also create some form of a data center-based farm in this case, because it's in the end, it's the same thing. It's the same OS that runs there, that actually also has data center capabilities, has access to larger networks, has access to these internet backbones, has a large number of IP addresses to make services available, and so on. So it's a layered approach where we really, as people, from our personal lives and from our personal situations, can contribute and create capacity. And then we need some of those farmers to also step up, and we call them professional or certified farmers, to actually do it in a data center type of environment where you have all the benefits of being very closely and well connected to these networks. There's a few other bits and tricks that we need to do to truly decentralize it, because what I spoke about to date in this presentation is that it decentralizes the actual physical capacity. You still are very reliable on, let's say, the network, because the network is also super centralized. It's telcos and large network operators, and these days Amazon and Google have their own networks. They determine how traffic flows on those networks and where they exchange these networks, this traffic with other networks. To truly decentralize also that, we've adopted a technology that's out there that routes in a very different way, that actually makes people able to have a unique identifier in their home that is knowing where the target for traffic exists, and that doesn't rely, because that's where decentralization comes from, that doesn't rely on what these internet backbones does. But I think that's too far and too much for this particular session. If when there is an interest, I'll be happily answering questions later on, or even in a private DMs type way later on. How do we think we can make this work? And again, this is the last really, really technical slide, and then I'll go back to the story and the storyline. So think of it that many, many people, again, that have an interest in either supporting this initiative to truly decentralize, or that have an interest to actually create and mint digital currencies. Both interests are good for us. And we aim to get to the millions of those individuals, but also to the millions of those individual computers, because that's the size that these large organizations like Google and Amazon are. They have millions, literally millions of computers in these warehouses full of them. And in order to be a player next to that, or to be able to augment what is already existing out there in a decentralized way, we need to get to the same number, and that same number needs to live everywhere. Like in every country, we need to have significant presence of these machines in every continent, in every location where there is electricity and connectivity. And we've built a blockchain-based mechanism where we store, and this is again the element of blockchain, where decentralization really becomes an element that allows this to scale to an infinite number of participants, where groups of computers have more or less their own chain to talk to. And why do they talk to the chain? Well, they talk to the chain to find out what they need to be doing. So in all of this, this operating system has a number of things that it understands really well what to do. And again, for lack of clarity and detail, start an application, stop an application, store some data, retrieve some data. It's those kind of primitives and simple things that it does that the operating system on the machine can do autonomously. It doesn't need instructions from an administrator, from a user. It finds out what those instructions are by actually reading in a blockchain, is there something for me to do? If there is something for this particular machine to do, it just executes. It doesn't even ask for who, for how long, for how much money. It doesn't really need all of that information. It just executes. Because before that description or the recipe was put inside that blockchain, there was consensus already achieved between, let's say, a developer and a user or a consumer of a particular service, that this particular application had to run in this city, in this country, on this continent for this particular user. So all of that goes beyond this machine, which means that the owner of the machine also doesn't know for whom it is actually working. It just sees digital currency arriving in its wallet. The actual smart person here that has development capabilities to create these smart contracts is the one that actually builds the model, the digital model, in terms of, this is the service I want to deploy. These are the machines that I want. I want them in North America. I want them to exist in Europe. I want them to exist in Asia Pac. I mean, he makes that choice. Once he's created his architecture and once he says, this is what I would like to deploy, his private key from his wallet is the signature, is the signing authority that actually makes and signs this smart contract in the blockchain, which then executes or allows these servers to execute. And since we can make groups of servers talk to one or two or three blockchains, since we can make them sovereign to a country where they have their own blockchain and only these servers talk to that particular blockchain, you can slice and dice this model into actually creating publicly shared clouds as we know them today, or even private clouds for, I don't know, companies or even countries. Give them their own sovereign digital internet. Where are we today? Because that is version, what I just spoke about, it was on the slide as well, is version 3 that we've iterated and innovated over the last 3.5 years, with 15 years of experience in doing it in other IT areas. Version 3 is now truly decentralized. There is no central component anymore. In the previous versions 2 and 1, we still had centralized components taking care of certain aspects of all of this. Right now, it's truly decentralized, and we've got about 1,000 farms. Again, a farm being one or more computers. Storage-wise, about 100 petabytes for the ones that understand. That is a lot, but it's nothing compared to what these current market leaders have. And we're looking for much more. We've got a few projects, side projects underway to start building capacity in territories where we don't have enough presence yet. So with that, and again, we only talked about step one. Step one is to create that utility, that ubiquitous capability to process and store data by using computers that are owned by anybody. That can be any computer, because again, they are not being sold by us. It can be any brand that you like. The operating system is what we've built. That is open source, and you can download that, and you can have that operating the hardware. And then there is these blockchains that actually store recipes of what needs to happen on these machines based on consensus reached by developers and farmers in terms of pricing and so on. So you get that it's sovereign because you can make it fit only in one country or even in one city. If you want to think Airbnb, where people own real estate and where they rent out a room, and before you actually arrive, now Airbnb being very centralized, but that's besides the point here. But the principle is the same, that you can rent and check and have, let's say, social ranking of where your data and where your data processing happens. Same story with us. The computer has ranking. The computer that is being used has a locality, and you can select where you want your data to be stored. Super private, because again, people are not allowed to actually touch these boxes. Even if you have a keyboard, you can't do anything with these machines. We didn't build a UI, a user interface to these machines. The only interface that they have is they talk to a blockchain and find it out. It's autonomous. We don't need administrators. We don't need people to look after this. It is self-healing to a degree that if the box is being rebooted because somewhat local power failed, it just goes back in the blockchain. That's the beauty of the blockchain. It starts reading at t equals 0, time equals 0, what it was doing or what it was not doing, and it will catch up to now, and it will find all of the things that are still relevant and that still need to be deployed. So it will figure out what it needs to do by itself. What can it do? Well, again, all of the workloads, because we've created interfaces, APIs to all of the existing automation frameworks. So it's really interesting to blockchain projects, because right now, most of the blockchain projects out there actually exist in those large data centers, Amazon being one of the most dominant ones. And even though the project in itself is decentralized, the actual physical running of the application or the blockchain nodes is not necessarily. With this, you can literally select single machines over different continents and actually run it. And we're talking to 30-ish of them to actually have single-click deployments. Metaverse being very new, but again, Metaverse being all around having digital experiences where you no longer necessarily, although a large organization disagrees with me, go to a central place to do so. We can create, and we'll see that in step 2, you can create your own digital experience online and share that with other digital meta nodes. Web 3.0 definitely, 2.0, all of the old stuff as well. And then IoT is a super, because that happens very remote from these data centers. And any bit of local processing capabilities and data storage capability is supporting IoT tremendously. What are we currently supporting and which pilot projects are getting live on this grid? Well, a major blockchain, Digibyte, created a new company and want to use their technology and give business models towards large enterprises. Again, very far-fetched. You'll see if and when you follow the news in the next 4 weeks, huge announcements of this. 2.4 million students that are doing projects around climate change, again, in many different areas. We support their capacity to store data. We support their initiatives by giving them video conferencing facilities and so on. Really, really very interesting. OwnCloud, some software that has been around for a long, long time to create a Dropbox-like setup. There's a country in Africa that we speak very closely to give them their own sovereign local internet capabilities and digital citizenship if we get to that. Yeah, a lot. So step 2, I think that's where I want to go, because this for me is where it really gets interesting, because right now it's just mimicking what is out there today, is creating a new data processing and storing fabric in a different way than what the others do, decentralized by anybody for anyone, supported by a digital currency. But now what can we do when you have such a decentralized data processing and storage capabilities? Well, and this is the idea, and we're very, very close to actually launching this as well. And again, it starts with me, with you having a private key. All of this is private public key pair authenticated, no username, passwords, and so on. I didn't really go there, but that's really, really important. So now that you can create, let's say, this private sovereign compute and storage space anywhere where you want it to be, close to you if there is a farmer, in your own home because you can have your own box, obviously, or somewhere near you in a facility where there's a farmer operating. What if you can create within that sea of data processing and data storage space your own little digital island? And your own digital little island, which is only you, can actually have all of your data, like Dropbox, stored in that little digital island that you have. So you have and you operate your own Dropbox, no longer a centralized company, but you get access to it, you have a web interface to it, it's secured by your private key, so that is the way to access it, no username, password, no hacks. Again, you need to be very careful with your private key, but no real leaks are possible with that. That's a simple use case, but what if we take it one step further? And what if we take it one step further, that on your little digital island, you start installing some applications, and think of applications like, I want to be able to send a message. Well, in the end, sending a message is nothing less or nothing more than writing a piece of text and then somehow get someone else to see it. You don't need a third party in the middle to be the conduit for that message to go from me to you. I can just send it to your little digital island without that third party to be there, in a secure way, encrypted, in a way that it is truly peer-to-peer. Or, same story, but then done in a different way, I can store that message in my little digital island and I can invite you to have a look at it. So the data doesn't even leave my digital island. I just invite you, like you do in your home, I invite you to come to my home, my digital island, and have a look at my photos, have a look at my messages that I wrote, have a look at my letters that I wrote, right? All of the current use cases you can do and build relatively simple if you have that precursor of this digital fabric existing everywhere with private and public keys securing it everywhere. Once you can get your own little digital island there, installing something like, or that mimics email functionality, or launching something that mimics video conferencing facilities. Because again, it's super easy, trust me. I mean, it still requires some technical knowledge, but in the end, it's super easy to launch a little version of Zoom in your digital island, and you just invite your friends or your employees or your acquaintances to come and have a chat with you using your own digital infrastructure to provide video conferencing services. It's all becoming possible. And again, we don't want to be doing this because this would be too much, because there's literally a million out there that you can facilitate. But that's where we rely on the rest of the world to see the potential here, to see what can be done with this, and to see how they can build their application in a different way. Which then leads to empowerment, because that is like electricity, right? The people that invented electricity, you can argue who that is, either Tesla or Edison, but the people that invented that did not build a TV, they did not build a computer, they didn't build a radio, they didn't build an EV. That is all what other people did based on having access to electricity. And we see what we have as digital electricity. Now we can give everybody the potential to build your own capacity. You don't need a data center for that. You don't need megawatts of power for that. You just need a lot of homes, or you need a school in which you have some spare room available with some electricity and connectivity. You can literally from the ground up, without all of those additional needs, start building your digital life. And that results in money, because then you can build your own social platform for your own communities or for your own people, which means that the money stays there. It's no longer flowing to this Amazon or to this Google centralized a few countries away from you through a long cable. You don't need to. Your data stays domestic. You are literally in charge and have capabilities now to store that local. Long story, and I can speak for hours about this, but since we made it so simple, since we took out a lot of the control structures, since we took out a lot of the interfaces that people use to manage these large facilities, it is a significantly lower carbon footprint because more of the actual capacity that is being made available, more of the actual CPU that's in there and memory is being used for applications and not longer for any management structure or automation overhead. You can think of government services being done on this, sovereign in a country, and actually being used by the citizens. Educational systems, again, YouTube, my son, and this one of the things I wrote to Yip in my bio as well. I mean, my son came back with something that he learned how to cook an egg in a microwave. In my experience, eggs explode in microwaves, but he learned on YouTube how to do that. I had no involvement and my wife did not. So there is a lot of education that can happen, only right now it's coming from centralized locations. So once you start storing data, information, videos, whatever, decentralized in your country, you can even do it in your own language, right? You can do a lot of things in a very different way. And you get economic growth by having local entrepreneurs and local innovators starting to innovate on this, just like with the radio and the TV. Let's build those things locally that make sense for local communities. And I think that's very much at the end. Rural communities, I mean, right now, very distant, not necessarily always having bank accounts, credit cards, right? Without a credit card, the current internet is very, very, very difficult to get to. So there are solutions out there, but I think by adopting a digital currency, which in the end, with a private key, can start on your phone, is a much easier step into a digital world that can exist locally to your city, to your community, to your country, as where we are today. And with that said, I'd like to open up for questions.
Thank you so much, Weynand. This is very a large topic
I'm
that you put
sorry.
together in a short time. It's amazing. We do have actually a few questions from the audience and everybody else. Also, you're free to write the questions into the chat. Maybe we start with very specific use cases. There's a question about mobile phones. Can the system work actually with mobile phones, and how are these mobile phones linked together to be the P2P internet?
Yeah, maybe inspired by a series that was on show not too long ago. But at this point in time, it is an operating system which needs to run on an Intel or AMD, again, very technical, but CPU, soon to also move to other CPUs, but right now not on phones yet. What is available on phones is in the end the experience layer, right? You can access if you go to the second part of the presentation where we don't look at that utility layer, but you can access your own digital island very well from your phone. So storing data, retrieving data, creating messages, having interaction from your phone through your digital self, because that's what we call it, to another digital self is very possible from a phone. But to make your phone support, contribute, and enhance this digital equity, digital substrate, no, not yet.
Okay. And what happens if the farmers close to the areas where they are located close their shops as a participant? How could then people connect to the internet?
Well, very good question. Connecting is not something that we focus on because connecting is still an internet provider play or a mobile provider play, right? That is in the end sending bits and pieces of data back and forth again to your local network. Farmers that exist inside a local network will obviously have a very efficient path to get to, and will be a lot faster, or a lot, depends on how fast your network is, but it will be faster and more efficient and less kilometers or miles to pass than going to these centralized big data warehouses. If the question is around data that is stored on it and no longer available, we've devised a method where we never use, let's say, a single farmer or a single disk to actually store data. So we take, again, that's a story for another time, I think. But if you think of storing photos, we always use multiple devices, physical devices, to store parts of that photo. And then we use a little bit of overhead to make sure that if one of those physical devices fails, that we have another physical device available with another part of data that can make that original photo not disappear, because obviously we don't want that and nobody wants that. So that has been taken care of, and that is built into the system, that data is secure. And even to the degree that we believe it is even indestructible, in the sense that you can't get it out, because we store data in a blockchain way as well, where it is immutable and always append is then the terminology. We don't overwrite data. So I hope that answers the question. A wide answer, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have more questions, and now this comes about equitability. Paula says, hey, it looks like a node costs like 900 euros. How would people be able to afford that?
No, that is a very good question, and that is a node that we call and sell for having nothing to do. So it arrives, you plug it in, and it works. But we actually have people in Africa that have older laptops that they, again, the operating system, it's not that we sell hardware to sell hardware, because that's not what we want as a project. We make it available as a ready-to-go solution because some people like that and want that. But you can download, you can create your own identity, your own farm identity, if you like, and you can use any piece of hardware, whether it's 10 years old or whether it's brand new, like this device. Any piece presents additional capacity, and therefore allows you to also earn a digital return. Again, the more modern, the faster the equipment is, the more your return is, because that's how the formula works. But in terms of also being affordable for people in regions where money is less available or where incomes are lower, they can all participate and make it work over there as well.
Thanks. We have a technical question from Paula. Can you actually do that with zero knowledge?
Storing data, if that's the question. I don't know, Paula. Zero knowledge as in become a farmer? Yes, because it's really super easy. It's 2 steps. You need to get yourself an identity, which is on the website. You fill in a name, and you need to install an app on your phone. So if that is equal to zero knowledge, then you can. And zero knowledge proof storage, but that's a totally different area. Let's not go there, because that's a big story around how we make data that sits on a device in a person's home not give any information to that person that owns the box. But I think that was not the question.
Yeah, it's actually cool if you were able to do that. And then from Slim, the question, what are the bridges to exchange, transact between personal islands and the data centers of the Web2 internet?
The bridges are the ones that are there. In the end, you connect. Let me put it that way. So my digital island is somewhere a digital space where I have rented some compute and storage capabilities. My access code to it is my private key, just like with any blockchain-based project where your private key signs a transaction. With us, you sign into your digital island. You can invite your friends or your family to do the same. Once you store on that digital island their public keys, obviously they can sign in with their private key in the same way, and they are truly authenticated into that digital area. In the end, the presentation of that digital island to the consumer, so the experience of it, is through a web interface, standard HTTP. We didn't change that. We didn't invent anything new there. It was just no need. So you can still use, if and when you want, Meta, I have to say now. So Facebook, former Facebook, next to on your phone as having your own digital island. We don't preclude, we don't pull the two things apart. The interface to it is equal, and obviously in the 30 years that the World Wide Web has been around, has proven its capability to scale to billions of sites. And this is just little digital islands that are yours, and your data is no longer at a third party. And you can invent, just like Meta or Facebook invents all sorts of people to consume that content and store content in their central location, a very large one. Your digital space and your digital island allows you to do that, but also invite your friends to come and have a look at your data if and when you want them to do so. I mean, the concept is the same, it's just you in the center instead of a third party.
Okay, let's zoom out a little bit because we also have a few questions about the blockchain. So number one is it is you use Polkadot or Substrate. Maybe you can share what makes you build or link to that blockchain. And the second one is somebody asked about Helium, like what is the difference between your project and then other projects such as Helium, or maybe there's even more projects out there.
Both good questions. I think Helium is very much about network and extending networks for people that want to use those networks. And that sounds more negative than I mean it, but that's what they do. With us, it's anything but networks almost. It's compute storage in the end that holds content. So they provide access in a very decentralized way, and we provide data storage and data processing capability. So we're very mutually, and we should speak to them. And that's on my agenda to basically contact them and see where they are and if they want to team up, because I think it's a beautiful marriage that we can make happen in this fast moving world. Polkadot Substrate. So like I said, it's the third iteration of this digital utility fabric. We choose Polkadot Substrate because it allows you to create in a very easy way all of these chains next to each other and scale out, which was the one component we missed in version 2 of this, where we were relying on one particular blockchain that even we built ourselves. And then Polkadot Substrate came around. They presented a way where you can have side chains and scale linearly in terms of the number of chains and have interchain capabilities of querying and sending data. That to us was a solution to a problem which we were thinking very hard about, and therefore we adopted it. We moving forward might or will, again undecided at this point in time, adopt many other blockchains as well. Because why stay with one if you can have many others out there that are innovating and that are actually inventing new things almost on a daily basis? And more likely than not, there will be a great one in the next month or in the next 6 months. And again, we're not wanting to limit ourselves to just do one technology. If there is somebody else that has done something fantastic where we can benefit from, we'll use that. And again, it can be multi-chain as well. There's no reason to stay single chain or single technology.
Okay, then final question. I think I've wrapped, I put in a few questions together into one. So the question is, what's your bigger plan for your token? Like the token basically strategy, and also how do you actually incentivize new users to join the network?
Good questions. So token is at this point in time very undervalued. We didn't put any effort in terms of being on many centralized exchanges or even many decentralized exchanges. We've been completely almost like underwater trying to make this thing grow and not necessarily focus too much. Not everybody's as happy with that as they can be, because there's many people that said your token hasn't moved in the last so many months and the rest of the world has progressed, which is very true. But we truly believe and want this to be a utility token that grows organically with the usage of the grid. And we're currently in a position that we believe, after hammering on this for 3 years and getting through 3 iterations of the same technology. By the way, just FYI, we didn't do an ICO. We didn't get a large runway at the start of all of this. This was funded to date by friends and family. All of us put together and chipped some money in a pot, and we are where we are. We believe that before the end of the year, we're really having a production grade mainnet operational. And with those 5 or 6 examples that I gave of early adopters, one country, a very well-known Dropbox alternative, a blockchain that wants to start presenting enterprise use cases to enterprises. We believe that we will get enough momentum and that people will start to investigate how this works for them, developers, system integrators and such, and that usage will grow and that the token demand will grow as well, which will drive up the price. That's the play we want to do. We've not really entertained much of the speculation that is going out there today with other tokens. But again, that's a choice. It's a choice we've made, and we're happy with that choice. Today is the time that real usage will, well, not today, but now is the time that real usage will start, and that we will see some growth in terms of token value.
Great, thank you very much for the outlook on the roadmap and also how you built the project over the past few years. It's quite amazing. We now go into little breakout rooms for us to just get to know each other and maybe also share your insights that you had while you listened to this talk. It helps really with understanding and gaining that fluency to speak about different topics. And you will also hear what the others took away from the session. So we all basically, the collective, are seeing the world through many different eyes and ears. And then we come back for a wrap up and we should be finished by the hour. So I'm opening the breakout rooms. You're free to join and then just use the time, and then we come back for a recap of the session. They should be open now, and then you can just join, click out breakout rooms.
That's 10 seconds to prepare for that one statement. It's a bit much. No, but I think the key takeaway is that there is an alternative, not just with us, but there are alternatives being built to augment, because it's not overtake, to augment how the world operates and is digitally connected today, that presents beautiful ways of connecting people over long distances without third parties being involved. And again, we're very proud to be one of those, but there's many more of those.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's super amazing kickoff of Unit Masters Cohort 7. And really, really highly appreciate that you're here. I'm actually attending a speaker session by the Helium team, by Peter, I think, at the Solana conference now in a few hours. So if I catch him, then I'll connect him to you. And
super, thank you.